Hi everyone, my name is Diego Robledo. I'm a double bass player from Mexico. I am also associate founder of La Escuela de Música en Línea. Please keep in mind that we will be sharing interviews with different artists from around the world to share their professional experiences with us. So if you are a student or a professional musician, please stay tuned to benefit from this initiative. I'm very happy and honored to have a very special guest for today's interview. And without any further introduction from my side, please let me welcome Jeremy McCoy, former assistant principal bass with Metropolitan Opera Orchestra in New York City and bass faculty at the Manhattan School of Music, Montclair University, and the National Youth Orchestra of Canada. Thanks, Jeremy, for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
How have you been?
Very well. I was just telling you earlier, it's kind of chilly here in New York. We had two very early fall days. But while you were setting up, I was looking at the weather, and it's going to return to some late summer temperatures starting tomorrow. But in the bigger picture, how am I doing? Fine. The Met furloughed all of its company very early in the pandemic, and I was thinking of retiring after 35 years anyway. I might have stayed another year or two, but it made a lot of sense for me to bail out as they say. And it's a very fortunate timing on my part to be able to do that. It's I'm sure all over the world people are experiencing the same thing. It's like Groundhog Day. I don't know in Spanish if you have a similar expression, but one day is just like the previous one and the next one, etc., right? It's such we've lost our routine. We're not being able to rehearse and perform on a regular schedule. So I find ways to keep busy. It's not that I'm idle, but one day looks so much like every other day, and that's a challenge.
Absolutely. So how was the impact of Corona at the Met in general and for your professional life? Could you tell us a little bit more about how?
Well, New York was hit very, very hard, right? It was in the States, it was by far the hardest hit in the first wave. Now maybe things are changing. I think perhaps California has had a more difficult ongoing time, but it really exploded in New York, and it makes you wonder just how many people in this region were exposed and didn't get sick. I mean, it just makes such a high density population, and especially in the theaters and museums and places where people congregate, the virus must have been spread far and wide. So yeah, a lot of illness. It's very, very scary that first month or so, getting used to the quarantine and the shock of all the theaters at Broadway and Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, everything shut down.
Wow.
And then it was very sad. Maybe in the second month of lockdown, a member of the orchestra who had fallen ill passed away. And it was, we had been told that the most at-risk population are the elderly and people with, chronic illnesses and what have you. And so it was quite shocking that a violist who was still a very vigorous man at I think he was only about 60. So, that just made it all the more real and scary. It seems to be very unpredictable. Of course, it does impact you know, people with certain conditions and the elderly most, but it seems to also have these random effects. You know, the spectrum of illness is not understood yet. So, but now, fortunately, the governor of New York and the governor of New Jersey, all the governments of the states in this area did a very good job getting things under control. And I think the transmission rate is actually very low now. I'm going back on Mondays to teach a few students who've opted to be on campus at Manhattan School. There were four tracks that the students could choose from to begin right away in September, live on campus. Now, of course, the academic courses, they're being offered online only, but the practical work can be done live if there's an agreement between the instructor and the student. So I have a few who have come to have their lessons live, and then others are coming later for a later start. And some students are entirely live for the whole semester and maybe ongoing into the second semester of this year. But yeah, so I'm going on Mondays to do a few hours at the school, and I feel with the social distancing and wearing a mask, I think it's going to be fine. But to all of the young people out there, high school, college kids who feel invincible, please wear a mask. It's so important. We could knock this thing down. Really, this disease, this illness doesn't have to go on and cause misery indefinitely if we just practice the social distancing and the hand washing and the simple thing of wearing a mask and wearing it properly. So you know, it's a minor inconvenience, really, compared to life and death.
Absolutely. Yes, totally. I agree. And I think that's one of the things that is hitting Mexico the most, because many people don't want to take that minor thing, such as wearing the mask, which is very simple. And that also, that really helps.
The faster we get this under control, the quicker we can go back to work. And it might be quite some time before things go back to normal like it was. But if we don't observe these simple precautions, we're just going to keep having surges of illness that cause us to stay in this perpetual state of lockdown.
Yes.
And arts organizations can't endure that indefinitely, because it's already a money losing proposition, right? At the best of times. So yeah, we have to really respect those rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
That's my public service announcement.
That's very good. Yeah. Well, I think moving to a little bit less sad stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we could start by talking a little bit about the basic questions about you, so we can give more context to those people in the audience who might not know you yet or are not familiar with your career, especially the ones that are non-bass players. Mm-hmm. So what first got you into playing the double bass?
I had to answer that question for like a Q&A thing just the other day.
Sorry.
for some posts for a festival I do in the summer. But I had played piano. My parents they're still alive and doing very well, but they were keen amateur musicians, and they wanted their kids to have music as part of their lives early on. So I was started on piano. I was never very accomplished on piano. I can't say I much enjoyed playing piano, but I did become familiar with notation and rhythm and all these things. But more importantly, I ended up joining an Anglican boys choir. And the Anglican Church is the Church of England, right? And there's a very long tradition of great liturgical music in the Anglican Church, and a tradition of having all men and boys choirs. It's a very sort of special sound to have the rather than sopranos, you have trebles, right? You have boys sopranos that we call them trebles. So I was a chorister in a very, very good and busy boys choir. And, we did performances as well. There's 2 services every week, and, 3 rehearsals per week. That training was fantastic. Maybe the most important training overall that I've gotten in my entire life. It was a very formative training, right? And when you sing, you have to develop pitch, you develop rhythm, and you internalize that rhythm, and you have to learn ensemble, right, to sing with others. So it really does give you the essential building blocks of music. I don't know, maybe someone would argue with this, but I think it boils down to basically rhythm. That's the most important thing. Pitch, and with pitch we have melody and harmony and all of that, but pitch, and then ensemble, knowing how to play not just rhythmically with yourself, but with other people, and to be sensitive to that. So I had that training, and then when I got to middle school, I wanted to play French horn. That's when instrumental music started, and I'd been to the local orchestra concerts, and I thought, oh, that's a cool instrument, and so I wanted to play French horn, but I was diverted because I was the tallest kid in the class. So the teacher thought, well, it's going to be easiest for me to play the double bass. So that's how I ended up playing bass. And then it was just a very happy circumstance, because I had no idea I would have any natural aptitude for any instrument, right? But it happened to suit me very well. And I was able to figure a lot of things out just on my own, and with some very rudimentary instruction from the middle school teacher, because he was not a bass player. I think he was a brass player. So it was very rudimentary instruction, direction on the bass. But I played, I got into it, and I'd even spend like lunch hour practicing. And then by the time I got to high school, I was interested enough. I wanted to get private lessons. And the next really fantastic and lucky circumstance was that there was a wonderful bass teacher, very gifted teacher locally, who played with the National Arts Center Orchestra. And so right away with the private instruction, I had great direction. I didn't, there was no time wasted, everything was very well thought out, and I built up my technique and everything very quickly, partly for my own enthusiasm for the instrument and aptitude, but also because of the quality of that instruction.
Great.
I was very lucky.
Yes, in fact, it's very difficult to find that kind of instruction, especially in the beginning,
Yeah, and it's such a wacky instrument, really. It's a very, it's so big. How do you even pick that thing up properly, And
yes.
So it's quite confusing how to play the bass. And of course, we have different methods of playing. You see the bass is actually played lots of different ways, really, with very well thought out methods. And there's not any one single way. But if you don't have good direction, then you can end up having habits that hold you back for the rest of your your progress is really stunted because you took a wrong turn early on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And are there any musicians, not specifically bass players, but musicians in general who inspired you, or who you consider very special for your career, like professionally?
Outside of the people who I studied with, who were very important, in terms of visualizing visualizing how the sound I wanted, the sound I heard or imagined in my ear, tying that to a visual cue, like how do you create that kind of sound on a string instrument? I'd say Lynn Harrell, who just passed away not too long ago. He was very active as a soloist when I was early in high school, and he came frequently to Ottawa, Ontario, where I grew up. And the way he was quite a big man, and the way he draped weight onto the instrument, it's just like boom, and nothing forced, and the sound that came out was enormous but full, not forced, not squeezed, not muscle. It just was weight, and the resonance was fantastic. And being able to sit up close and see how he did that was very important. So a lot of course, that first teacher of mine, David Curry is his name, he talked about this also, but I really was able to tie those ideas to a visual cue watching Lynn Harrell play. Later on, I would have to say, like in my years at the Met, of course, there was so much great singing, and you can't help but absorb those ideas of phrasing and color. But probably the one singer that, as a bass player, who I was influenced most by was Kurt Moll, a German bass, basso profundo. Really had a tremendous low range, but also beautiful upper register. Anybody interested in great singing should YouTube, look, Google him, watch some YouTubes of Kurt Moll, Moll, fantastic singer, and to hear that quality and color and phrasing in our range, with that, well, we go even lower, of course, but that helped develop my concept of sound as well.
Yeah. Quite famous singer, actually.
Yeah, you've heard of him?
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful singer and actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So I know you also attended Curtis Institute of Music. So I would like to know, like, what was your experience during your studying, like, student years there? And like, I don't know if I've heard many people attend the school for a while, and then they go for a job for some time, they come back. I've heard stories like that. I don't know exactly how was your story, but
yeah, little bit unusual, not unheard of. But I was only at Curtis for 2 years before I left, and of course, there were things that I learned there that were very, very important, but it wasn't the most productive time for me. I had been a great practicer through high school, and when I got to Curtis, maybe it was partly, immaturity and being out on my own. There was no dormitory or anything in those days. You had to get your own place. And I had this just awful, seedy apartment on a back alley. And I'd come from, pretty Ottawa, and I was there in sort of broken down center city Philly. And it was just like, ugh. I must have had probably the worst apartment of any student at school. So I don't know. It was. It just wasn't a productive time for me. I think I spent more time drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes than I did practicing. So, I got my work done, but I didn't really take advantage of that institution the way I might have if I was in a different mindset. It was great to be around other very talented bass players, right? That's one of the most important things going to a school. You have your teacher, right? You want to have a good match with your teacher. You want someone who will give you great instruction, but you also want to be in an environment that spurs you on. You need to have some competition. You need to have people around you who are aiming to do the same thing and doing certain things better. And if you're an ambitious young person, you don't want other people to do things better. So you practice, right? Yeah. Anyway, so that was there were some great things that Curtis had to offer, but I had an opportunity to take a job in my hometown back in Ottawa with the National Arts Centre Orchestra. I auditioned and was offered the job, and it wasn't really that difficult a decision because, well, you go to music school to achieve that number one, but the question was, should I leave early after 2 years and pass on that job? Had I been in a different mindset at Curtis, if it was a something that was really spurring me on to achieve, then it would have been a more difficult decision. But it seemed like the money, get the job, get the real professional experience, have the income. But also this particular job was good because I was going back to my hometown. I was going to be playing with people who had been my instructors, right? So it was still kind of a safe place to go and to continue learning, but in a professional context and get paid for it. So I did that for 1 year, and then I did an audition at the end of that season for the Met, and I moved to New York.
Great.
Now, I did finish my degree though, and I'm very glad that I did. So I had left, I started at Curtis in the fall of 1982, and I left in the spring of 84. Spring of 84, and I went directly into the National Arts Centre. I was at the Met in what would have been my senior year. So that was like 85, 86. My Curtis degree is dated 1997.
Oh, really?
So quite a number of years later, I decided I wanted to finish my degree. And it took a couple of years. I did some online courses for academics that I really enjoyed. And being older, basically being what they would call a mature student now, my whole perspective on learning had changed, right? And so I was much more keen to learn anything, not just music, but became a very avid reader and particularly interested in history. And then they were very kind at, I did some credits through City University of New York, the campus of Lehman College, because that's divided up into different colleges. And I had some excellent instructors there, including a very, very famous composer, John Corigliano. He taught at the school, and I took orchestration with him. So, yeah. So I had some credits that way, and then some correspondence school credits. And then they were very strict about music history and theory. They wanted me to learn according to the Curtis curriculum. And there's a school in New York, the Mannes School, that had basically the same faculty for those departments. And so I was able to get tutoring locally in New York, and then I'd go down and write all the tests and exams in Philadelphia for those courses. And so it was, I think it was more work doing it this way than if I had stayed in school. Sort of muddled my way through. But I got my degree, and it's nice. I'm quite proud to see it on the wall. It's, dated more than 10 years later than it should be.
Yes. In fact, I have a question actually. Like, when you entered the first time, you had the same professor than when you entered for the second time, or?
Oh, you're talking bass instructor?
Yes, the bass.
Yes, actually, Roger Scott was still teaching at the school. He hadn't retired from the orchestra or from Curtis when I did go back. He was still there. So his name is a co-signer on my degree. But because I was working in, a major orchestra, I was playing recitals, going to, international chamber music festivals. And they actually passed me out of all of that practical stuff. So I didn't have to take lessons or play a graduating recital. That they just said, no, that's fine.
Let's go.
But all of the academic stuff, they definitely wanted me to learn and prove that I had a secure knowledge in those areas. Yeah.
Great. Now, for those in the audience who do not know yet, Jeremy recently retired from the Met Opera. This happened after a successful career of 35 years. Am I right?
35 seasons, yeah.
35 seasons. Wow. In that regard, what are your most remarkable experiences working in the company, the Metropolitan?
Yeah. That's a tough question. But there are a few things that were really special, stand out. And Carlos Kleiber, very famous, probably the most celebrated conductor of his generation, I'm sure, and admired by all of his peers. I think one of the things that makes it so easy for them to admire him is that he didn't really pursue the music directorships. So he wasn't interested in that after a certain point in his career. So he wasn't really professionally competing with them. He just did a lot of guest conducting. I think he joked that he would only take an engagement when his freezer started to get empty. I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure, but I think really his only ambition, certainly as he got deeper into his career, was not professional ambition, but ambition to do fantastic performances, and that's what he did everywhere he went. So he did come to the Met, and he did Bohème and Traviata and Rosenkavalier and Otello. And those were absolutely amazing runs of all of those. And all the best singers for those roles would clamber to be involved in any revival of an opera that he was in charge of. So great cast as well. And yeah, very, very inspiring musician. Seiji Ozawa was phenomenal with Tchaikovsky operas. So those I remember as being great highlights. Kirill Petrenko, who is now the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic. You know, somebody who, as he grows, will probably become a Kleiber-esque figure. You know, that he's very nearly at that level, I think, from my experience. But he's still a young man. The things that he did, Kovanchina, I did with him, and I got to do a run of Ariadne with him conducting, and that's just that was extra special because that's an opera where there's an opera within the opera, and it's very lightly scored to begin with. It's only 2 basses, but then a big chunk, the bulk of the opera is only 1 bass, and so I got to do that whole run with Petrenko conducting. You know, it's always fun to be able to play on your own. You know, it's very satisfying to play with other people too, but it's fun to play on your own.
Yes.
So
you are really on the spot.
Yeah. Petrenko and Daniele Gatti, I thought was really great with both Parsifal and Aida. Simon Rattle more recently. Yeah, those are, for me, I mean, I'm missing some things, but those are the most special memories. And then hearing, you know, Kathy Battle in her prime and Kurt Moll, all those seasons with him, Pavarotti, you know, just a freakish voice, you know. He wasn't a great actor, you know. He didn't move that well. He just sort of planted himself, and he knew how to use the stage. He'd sort of slightly sing down into the stage to bounce his voice out. And what a voice! Wow. So, and anyway, I could go on a long time, but those are some special highlights.
Yeah. That's great. That is great. Great stories. I'm sure you have many more. They can be, I mean, 35 seasons.
The fact that I've left out some famous people, but you know, I still think that the Kleiber and Ozawa things are absolutely the top for me.
Great. So, like, in my perspective, I think not many bass players get to play operas or in opera companies, even less, because I don't know, I have a feeling that in number, at least in Mexico and United States, I think there are more symphonic orchestras than opera companies. So then maybe they don't get to play many times. But from your perspective, what are the main challenges that a bass player faces by playing or by working in an opera company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think our goal as orchestral musicians should be to operate really the way a chamber musician does. And, you know, we all know that the difference, right? How much more you have to have feelers out and make decisions on your own, right? Without following. You have to know your part. You have to know how it fits with the rest of the ensemble. You're an equally responsible member with all the other people in that small ensemble, right? But our goal as orchestral musicians should be to treat in that larger ensemble, our responsibility should be the same. that yes, there's a conductor, but not to just follow along, not to play just kind of four square. And what happens in an opera orchestra is that because the conductor has so many other things to do, like his or her attention could be entirely just with the stage for long stretches. So opera orchestra musicians have to learn to play with much more independence and play much more like chamber musicians. So when you have all of those skills, and it just becomes second nature as working that way with an opera orchestra, then when you go to play the symphonic repertoire, you're still behaving the same way. And I've been lucky. I've dropped in to play, for one program or even a month subbing with top orchestras, symphony orchestras that don't play. That all they do is they don't play opera. They only play symphonic repertoire, and I mean top world-class orchestras, and they don't play that way. It feels like, I mean, in my experience, it feels like they're just playing in a box. They sound amazing, but there's just, if they had that operatic experience as part of what they did all the time, they wouldn't play like that. And probably the orchestra that is most identified with doing both is the Vienna Philharmonic. That you can only become a member of the Philharmonic by coming through the Vienna State Opera. So every member of the Vienna Philharmonic knows how to function as an opera orchestra musician. And that's part of the greatness of that orchestra, I think. Yeah. It would serve all symphony orchestras very well to do more opera, even if it's not staged, concert opera, because it does require it absolutely requires more feelers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also know that auditions for opera companies work quite different from symphonic orchestras. So, like, besides the audition repertoire, what is something that a bass player should keep in mind when preparing for an opera audition?
When it comes to the audition itself, after that long spiel I just did about having feelers and all of that, how do you test for that in an audition? Unless there's a part of the audition that is, bringing people in and trying them, which a lot of orchestras do. But if it's just limited to the individual performance of excerpts, how do you test for that ability? You can't. So I can't think, at least not on spur of the moment, I can't think of anything that's wildly different about the way you would prepare the excerpts, except, one possibility, if it's a very well thought out operatic list of excerpts without a lot of repetition of technical challenges, right? You don't want to. I've seen lists that are just, spiccato, and then another excerpt that's all about spiccato, and then another one after that that's about, how many times does the candidate have to show the same skill, But, okay, there are little subtle differences between how you use the spiccato, so I don't want to sound like an ass by complaining about this, but some lists are far too long. with a lot of repetition of the same skill set. So, but maybe with a good operatic list, you need to perhaps characterize more, right? But that's not even true, because the symphonic repertoire is full of characterization. Nah, that's a bogus difference. I don't think there is really a difference.
That's the answer then.
just play what we rhythm, pitch, tone, style, dynamics. Of course, that's yeah. But if you have the there would be a difference in a situation where there's an additional round playing in the job, right? The challenges for a young, unexperienced player to go and play a live trial with a symphony orchestra, those challenges might not be quite as daunting as if that was a required part of an opera audition. It is more difficult to just come and plop yourself into an opera orchestra context. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now in this regard, talking about the auditions, there are many schools and teachers that focus mostly on solo repertoire preparation through the whole program. But I remember that I don't know if that works the same way with all your students, but when I had lessons with you, there was a very important focus on audition preparation, on excerpts, orchestral repertoire. So at which stage of education you think it's good to start working on these excerpts with the students?
I think very early on. Ideally, okay, well, when you're first starting to learn the bass, of course, you have to acquire enough skills before you can get to looking at any of the standard excerpts, right? And looking at the very simple early orchestra pieces, that's not so valuable compared to just doing etudes and simple solo pieces. But once you have a good intermediate level, you should start introducing some Mozart excerpts, right? Once you are developing a spiccato, I don't think you should teach spiccato without making excerpts an avenue to learning that stroke. Learning simple back and forth spiccato, but then spiccato with figuration, the way Mozart uses in and out of slurred groupings with then spiccato, separate spiccato notes in between. Yeah, in my mind, it should be certainly all of the students that I see at the college level, unless there is some like if there's a recital coming up or some reason that you need to absolutely dedicate an entire lesson to solo work, I think part of every lesson should be working on excerpts. I think, well, haven't you found that there are actually more bowing challenges in the orchestral repertoire than there are in solo pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, I think spiccato, because I've noticed many people really do well playing the solo repertoire, but like some other kind of strokes or style, like things about the style of a spiccato or some other orchestral stroke, I find that some people really struggle with that, like with mastering that, and that's very important because that's what you present when you want to get a job. No?
Yeah, Yeah, it's not serving the student well. It's very sad in a way to see a player who is very gifted and accomplished with the solo repertoire and make a big impression with that. And then really, even with the most standard excerpt, play on a much, much lower level. That's not, and obviously this is a person who has the ability to do both well, right? But it's just a matter of exposure, right? But and then if you go for the audition and you can't, even the sort of European style audition, which is very heavily at the start, the early rounds are all solo, I believe, right? I think that's the format that they use, and you often don't get to playing any excerpts until you're in the finals, right? But what happens if you've made a huge sensation in the first couple rounds, and then you get to the finals and you can't play the excerpts well? How disappointing is that? So it's just, you have to expose the student to all those challenges too. And to my mind, the greater difficulty is the right hand anyway with first stringed instrument. You know, technique wise, and that's our voice. So not just forming the strokes, but cultivating a spectrum of sound. It's I think the more difficult, the more important of the two hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now, for example, I imagine if you teach at Manhattan School of Music and Montclair University, you also have students in the National Youth Orchestra of Canada.
Yeah.
So when it comes to choosing students, what are the qualities or the qualities that you see the most that you look at the most in potential students?
I look for potential. I look for, well, those rudimentary things, not rudimentary, but those, a good ear, right? So playing in tune, or even if you don't hit all the notes dead on, that you can quickly adjust, right? An awareness of pitch, so you can tell, even if someone's not playing super well in tune, you can tell that they are aware of that, you know, and they're trying to fix it. So good ear, good rhythm, and good tone, some sort of sound concept. That's one of the most difficult things to teach, I think. If you don't have a sound idea of your own, it's not so easy to teach that. It's much better if the player already has some ideal sound wise. You can only really make a sound if you can hear it. Imagine that sound. So that's something that it would be nice to see. So either an already very well-formed sound, or someone who is demonstrating that they're trying to do that. And then I think it's also really important at the college level to take somebody who is going to stream well into the way, in my case, the way I play, or the way I was taught. You know, something that will not, you don't want to take someone who's got a wildly different method of playing, right? And then say, because you're going to want to say, can you please totally change the way you do that? You know, that's not necessarily fair to the student if it's already working quite well, right? It'll just be a battle. That's it. And then, of course, I mean, then it comes down to affordability, right?
Yeah.
Can the student get enough scholarship money, and what are the resources to make up the difference? And there's always that's the last and biggest obstacle sometimes to having people come into your studio is affordability.
Yeah.
I wish it were free. I really wish it wasn't expensive, but it is.
We all wish, believe me.
Oh, the schools that are fully endowed, like Curtis and Colburn and Yale now for the graduate program, you know, they offer a lot in terms of training, but it's also very attractive because it's free. So it's, if you offer that, it's easier to raise the level of the studio because that's not part of the decision, affordability. What is can I just ask you, in Mexico, what is university very expensive?
No, well, not really. It's talking about music education. Most schools are public, so you don't really have to pay a lot to attend college. You can even get scholarships to pay the tuition or the fees, extra fees that are applied, but they are really not very expensive. It's very affordable, actually.
But heavily subsidized by the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's a great investment in the future of a country to make higher education affordable to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, there are in fact some orchestral programs that to me are very interesting because you can get to school, you play in an orchestra, and you get a scholarship for that, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, so you even can pay part of your rent or your living costs from that, and that's pretty convenient for the students, you know, like that don't have a lot of money to afford or to go live in some other place, you know, some other state that is far from where they are from, they're original from.
Good.
Yeah. So now, okay, in that regard as well, about the schools, I know that, for example, at Manhattan School of Music, there are several teachers. I don't know, in fact, how many teachers.
There are 4 bass teachers.
Four.
Yeah.
So when you have your own studio, you have to follow a curriculum that the school tells you to do, or everyone takes their own approach for each student?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it's even personalized student by student. There is a curriculum, though. There are requirements. You have to play a jury. We don't have juries. In Manhattan School, we don't have juries until the spring. There are no juries at the end of the fall semester. At Montclair, there are juries at the end of each semester. So you have to prepare your students for those. There's a requirement for graduating recital, and those requirements vary based on the degree program. Right, so the graduate students have to give a longer, a bigger program. And we have orchestral rep class prerequisite or requirement, not prerequisite. It's compulsory is what I meant to say. For juniors, seniors, and grad students have to take. I don't know why they don't have ideally that class should begin in the freshman year and not just be limited to the upperclassmen. But I guess there are so many other courses that need to be cleared away in terms of theory and music history and what have you in the first couple of years that there's not time for the rep class. But that's one of the nice things for me is that I have my own studio, but I also, because I'm the coordinator of the rep class and I co-teach that with Oren O'Brien, I get to know everybody. I get to know all the students. And
nice.
I get not just to know them, but to be, teach them a little bit too. So say if we have, right now we don't have 20 base students because a number of students have decided to take gap years, right? Which makes a lot of sense. So our numbers are down, and that doesn't even impact the functioning of the school because the large ensembles are not happening. There's an ensemble requirement, but the largest group is restricted to 10 people.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, anyway, it just, I have one grad student who lives in China, and she elected to take a gap year for financial reasons, I believe, but also I think a lot to do with the political tensions right now between the United States and China, and like the embassy's not even open for her to renew her visa. And so it's just like too many obstacles. This most sensible thing is for her to take a gap year. And I'm meeting with her like once a month on FaceTime just to keep her going. And she works very well independently, so that's fine. And another student who took a gap year because his ambitions are to work on Broadway. Now he enjoys playing electric bass. He's actually already been out in the world playing a little bit, not in New York, but in the DC area, that kind of freelance career. So he wants to be in New York to get his degree, but also to begin making ties into the Broadway scene. Well, there is no Broadway scene this year. So he decided to take a gap year and come back next year when hopefully things are going again.
Yeah, I think
sure they will be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a part of the school itself for the teacher, for them is also an opportunity, to be in the surrounding where things are happening, like artistic projects, or you can freelance with great musicians around. So that's also an important part for their career.
So one of the deciding factors for students coming to the schools in New York is being here in New York, right? Being able to go and see not just the local orchestras and the opera at this very high level, but a place that every group from all over the world comes to, right? And so it's a real mecca for music, classical music. And if you can tap into the student ticket prices, it's affordable to take in a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in regard of your recording projects, you have collaborated with great musicians from the classical world and also with jazz musicians such as John Patitucci, to put an example, who is a great figure around the world. So would you like to share a little bit more about these projects for people who haven't listened? Where can we find it? And I mean, in general.
Yeah. Well, Dialogues with Double Bass, that seems like such a long time ago now. That came out in 2005. So 15 years ago, right? Longer, because it was right at the very beginning. I think January of 2005 it came out. But that was I was at a point where I had you can't. I won't say you can't, but it's very rare to, unless you put in a grant proposal to do some special project of contemporary music or something, it's very difficult to finance recording, right? And they don't make any money, you know. It always costs a lot more to make a record than you're going to get back, and that's just gotten worse over time with Spotify and etc. You know, you're never going to make your money back. But I had a couple of good years doing studio session work where I felt I had some extra money. And I thought, I'd really like to make a record. And I had in the studios met people like John, right? That's where I met John. And we struck up a friendship. And then I had good friends from outside the orchestra in the new music scene. And just came to me, I'd like to do this, collaborate with these friends of mine. And I found some repertoire that would make a very interesting, unusual, sort of eclectic program of music. And luckily, everybody I asked said, sure, they'd do it. And, essentially donated their time and services to help me make this project. I could never have afforded to do it if I had to pay them what studio session rates. So, but it was done very professionally by a wonderful producer, Grammy-winning producer. So the quality of the record was very good. What was your question again? That was the first one. That was 2005, and then I got an itch to do another. Several years later, about six, 7 years later, I did that Baroque record with the
recording with Kurt Muraki and
Kurt played continuo on a Handel sonata, on two sonatas as sort of continuo bass with harpsichord, Eccles and a Handel sonata. And then he also played in the group that accompanied me for the Couperin suite that was assembled by Paul Basilaire, that the cellists played. What's that suite called? Myrna, help me out here. Pièce en concert. Yeah, it's not really pieces assembled by Couperin. They're taken by this French cellist, Paul Basilaire, and put together pastiche. But yeah, Kurt played also on that. And then the three gamba sonatas I did with brilliant organist from Ottawa, Matthew Larkin, who played a little portatif, little portable organ rather than harpsichord. That balanced, it gave it that sort of Baroque. It was an authentic Baroque instrument of the period, but the organ balanced a little bit better with the weight of a double bass versus a gamba, which has not just higher but thinner kind of sound.
Yeah.
I wonder if I do another recording project, I think it would have to be a DVD, because that seems to be the thing now, is videos, right?
Yeah.
And no one even buys CDs anymore.
Yes.
Maybe if you're a pop band and you have such a huge hit that you have literally millions of listens, and the format of a pop song is they're like, how long are they, like 3 minutes, right? And so someone could listen to that song over and over all day long. So if you got 1 million people listening to it over and over, then maybe you can make some money. But our music, people only listen to it once, if you're lucky, right? And maybe months later come back and listen again. It's not designed for repeated listenings.
Yes.
And to begin with, we have such some smaller audience, really. So yeah, the whole recording, the prospects of making any money, forget about it. Even I don't think the biggest stars in classical music make any money from their records.
I don't think so.
Maybe what Pachelbel Canon, or something like that has done really well.
Yes. Also, in that regard, many people don't know yet that you have launched during this lockdown an Instagram account and YouTube channel. You have uploaded some content of that.
Oh yeah, please let's plug the YouTube channel. I want subscribers.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we find you there?
It's called Jeremy McCoy / double bassist. Now, I gotta tell you a story. Now, when now YouTube has a lot of but they stream albums now, right? So the digital distributors for both my records, Dialogues with Double Bass and Baroque Legacy, put the material on YouTube. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily the go-to place to hear that stuff. People probably go to Spotify, but you can find it on YouTube. So YouTube, which is basically run by algorithms, right? Not by actual people, just by algorithms. They saw, oh, there's these records by Jeremy McCoy. Let's make what they call an auto-generated channel called Jeremy McCoy -topic. Well, they didn't know who Jeremy McCoy was, so they looked online, and this is they found a Jeremy McCoy who is an electric bass player who had a Wikipedia page, and still does have a Wikipedia page, and the algorithm didn't differentiate, so they attached his biography to this auto-generated channel with my content. Anyway, that's finally, after a long time, it's been corrected. But it was so funny that they, it's just like some dystopian digital universe where you have your identity is stolen or doesn't mean anything. Anyway, it was not a serious thing, but it's nice to have it straightened out, because all the keywords, Jeremy McCoy, bass, those obviously they can't differentiate between us. But anyway, so there is that YouTube channel. Don't go to that one. Go to Jeremy McCoy / double bassist.
Okay.
And I don't have a lot of content, but I'm going to get some more. I have some things recorded. I'll keep it coming. Try to do at least one thing a month.
Great. About Instagram, how can people find you there?
Instagram is Jeremy McCoy 63.
Okay.
That's not a very good handle, but when I created the account, I put in Jeremy McCoy, and it was already taken, so I had to go with something. I didn't realize that was going to become my Instagram name, or I would have come up with something else, but that's what it is.
Great.
So now everybody knows I'm born in 1963.
Yeah. So I'll put it on the subtitles for the recording version of this, so also you can have some followers from Latin America that surely are going to be listening to this interview.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and some YouTube subscribers.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I want to see my subscribers jump. Come on, Diego, get me some YouTube subscribers.
Yeah, yes, I'll do it.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Another thing, you have, I think you have 2 basses, and would you like to talk about those basses? I think one of your basses is in fact a modern instrument. So there is this discussion among classical musicians, especially, that all their instruments tend to be like more quality or more appropriate. Sometimes there is this idea, but I mean that many people look for all instruments, all double basses, looking for the sound quality, etc.
Yeah, we can talk about, that's kind of an interesting subject. Yeah, old basses also, they haven't become old in the way violins have become old, or violas, or even cellos. Most old basses have become old in years, and also beaten into, splinters a lot of the time, because they're so big, right? They're the way they have to travel you can't take the bass. I mean, how many times I don't even think you can take a bass on a plane anymore, right? Like in the cabin.
No.
Right? So the way they've been transported, the way that because of their size, they've been subject to terrible injuries over the years. So most old basses are also a wreck, and have also been subjected to a lot of really awful repairs. So in many cases, you can have an instrument that looks beautiful, and even by a very fine maker, that really isn't any good anymore. So I think that's true. Not all makers of fine violins, violas, and cellos had a knack for how to make a bass. They're enough different that so even going back, not all the great old masters were the best makers of basses, and some of the people who were the finest bass makers didn't make the other instruments particularly well. But anyway, yeah, so that's one problem with old basses, is that often they're old and terribly damaged, almost irreparably damaged in many cases. Nowadays, we do have some amazingly gifted luthiers who do fantastic restorations of basses, and are also building very, very. It's like, maybe some people say maybe it's a golden age of bass making, because there are so many talented people making basses now. But yeah, the other thing about, if you're lucky enough to have a very fine old instrument with pedigree and all of the things you want, and with a tremendous sound, good healthy instrument, sometimes the quality of sound is so complicated, so complex, that it's actually, and it sounds wonderful in a great big space, and it sounds wonderful in its function as a bass instrument within an ensemble, right? The kind of sound that goes everywhere, that's maybe not the best kind of sound to audition with, or to record with, or unless you have a very special high-end recording apparatus. The sound is too complicated, really, to be captured and understood as a clear sound, right? So I think it can almost be a liability, for instance, to go and play an audition on an instrument of that type. It's certainly not a liability to play the job with that kind of instrument. It's what everybody wants. But to play the audition, maybe it's better just to have a nice, clear, more trebly cutting sound. Something that is very easily understood by the adjudicators. I have the old Italian instrument that's always been called a busan, Domenico Busan, this fantastic bass. I guess it's still considered modern. It's from 1946, right after World War II. So yeah, that's a modern bass, right?
Mm-hmm.
That belonged to the first owner of that bass was a man named Fritz Massmann, who's notable because a lot of bass players who have used a German excerpt book, Probespiel book, with a black and gold cover. He's the editor of that book. I think he was an important player, principal of one of the orchestras in Germany and teacher. And I think he was also the editor of the Findyson Concerto, which must be hellaciously difficult based on his etudes. You know, the technical etudes are just crazy hard. So anyway, that's just an aside. That's kind of interesting that he was the first person to own that. And then it was sold to a retired colleague of mine from the Met, who was, when he was a young man, he was stationed in Germany playing in an army orchestra. And so he bought it from Massmann. So I have that great, very good German bass. And then I have a very modern bass made in Cremona by a Japanese maker, but who maintains a shop in Cremona. His name's Tetsu Suzuki. I have that as well.
Great.
I don't need 3 basses now. I'm going to sell one of them. If anybody can afford to buy a bass right now.
Yes, that's a big question.
Now, is your bass a 4-string bass or?
It's a four-string bass. Yes, and in fact, in Europe, it's very common to have 5-string basses.
Yeah, that's
extensions
why
are not very common there, but this is more like kind of solo instrument. I couldn't say it would be too much like orchestral because the body isn't so big, but it's very comfortable for me to play.
Good.
Yeah. So
that's the other thing about modern instruments, is that the model needs to be different now, especially for somebody who can only afford to have one instrument, because now we're playing many more pieces that require access over the body. And some of the old basses have just enormous shoulders, or, you know, they weren't designed with that in mind to play Bach suite transcriptions and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Jeremy, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing with us your experiences.
Sure, my pleasure. It was fun to see you and to talk with you and see Myrna around the corner there. Yeah, good luck with the school. I hope it's a big success. Okay, it's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you as well.
Bye-bye, Diego.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.